Hey listeners, it's Andrea. Today, we figure out on which side of the Western fan line we sit. Worf has a real way with women. And we ask the question, does Picard not know how to activate the locks on his doors? Come nerd out with us.
Welcome to the TNG Podcast, the #1 place in the Alpha Quadrant to geek out about all things Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm your co-host, Shereese.
Hey, I'm your co-host, Andrea. Shereese, today we are talking a super fun episode, Season 6, Episode 8, A Fistful of Datas. Woohoo! Yay! This episode was written by Robert Hewitt Wolf and directed by Patrick Stewart.
Oh, I did not know that.
I wouldn't have known that either had I not looked it up. So after a computer malfunction, Worf, his son Alexander, and Counselor Troy are trapped in an Old West holodeck program wherein the interactive characters physically resemble and have the same enhanced abilities as Data. And they're bad guys.
Bum, bum,
Bum,
bum.
bum, bum. What are your initial thoughts on this episode?
I am so excited to talk about today's episode. This is one of my favorite episodes for no reason, really. Like, I just love it. It's silly. It's fun.
Just so fun.
It's just fun. Yeah. It's just a good time. And actually, I don't know if you remember this, Andrea, but this is the moment, this episode is the reason why we have this podcast, because you and I were talking one day about whatever we were talking about.
Okay.
And I said, oh, I was binge watching Star Trek last night and I was watching this episode. It's called Fistful of Datas and it stars. And I started to explain it to you, not knowing you were a Trekkie. And you said, yeah, I love that episode. I love how they call it the Ancient West. And it was that moment where I was like, oh my gosh, Andrea's a Trekkie. Not only does she know I'm talking about Star Trek: The Next Generation, she knows the episode I'm talking about. And she just quoted a freaking line from the episode that we pulled out of thin air. And I was like, wow, this is deep. And we had been friends for like 10 years at that point.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to review this episode with you, the episode that started it all.
Oh my God. I did not remember that this was the episode that started it all. That makes me feel so happy because it's such a fun and memorable episode. It is like, I really love the science fiction and I love the hard science, but like this one isn't super sciencey, but like it doesn't need to be. It's really fun. It's
You're right.
campy. It's there's a little touch of silliness to it. Star Trek has this magnificent ability to find humor in places that are not maybe super obvious or don't make it sound super slapsticky. Like when Data is starting to sort of fall apart and he's talking to the senior staff and he's like, well, I reckon it'll only take 2 or 3 hours to run this diagnostic. And they're like, what did you say? He's like, the diagnostic should only take 2 or 3 hours. They're like, no, you said I reckon. He's like, I don't think so. And you're like, it's just silly little things where you're like, oh, right. Without it being like, look at this guy falling on his ass over and over again or whatever, right? It's just like little ways that are really funny. Now, I don't know the answer to this, so you're going to have to tell me. Shereese, are you a fan of Westerns? Have you ever been a fan of Westerns?
I am not, nor have I ever been a fan of Westerns.
Oh, interesting.
My grandmother is obsessed with Westerns. I feel like maybe she grew up watching them, ? I'm not really sure. But she loves Westerns and watches them nonstop. I find them like extremely like offensive, especially to any person of color, especially to Native Americans, but also any other characters of color were usually played by white people in like brown face. And I just, at the time, I'm sure it was totally fine, like totally fine. But because I'm just from a different era, every time I see them, I'm bothered by like 98% of them. So I never really got into them. But it's a whole genre that's just like not my cup of tea. Why? Do you like Westerns?
I do love Westerns. I've always really loved Westerns. My dad loved them. And as a matter of fact, like one of the movies that we used to watch together a lot was The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly with Clint Eastwood. And that movie came out in 1966. And the name A Fistful of Datas actually has some history. So just a little breakdown of this. Westerns became really expensive to film in Hollywood because they were all the rage in the 60s. Right. It was cowboy movie this, cowboy movie that, and even in the 50s and stuff. And so Sergio Leone was a Italian filmmaker who would make these Westerns in the Italian, like countryside to make it look like a Western town. And he would make it for like a fraction of the price of the Hollywood version. And so they started being called spaghetti Westerns because it was made by like Italian filmmakers in Italy. And A Fistful of Dollars was one of his first huge hits. And so that's why they wanted to do a little spin on this with A Fistful of Datas. There was an alternate title to this episode, and they were going to call it The Good, the Bad, and the Klingon. It's like, that's kind of silly and kind of messed up.
I'm glad they went with A Fistful of Datas.
Yeah.
I think that was a good call. Good call,
yes.
people. So
yeah.
wait, we haven't heard your initial thoughts, though. What are your initial thoughts of this episode
my gosh.
specifically?
I don't know. I feel like I kind of said it's like it's just super fun. It's not super sciencey, but it's just really campy and fun. And I like how it sort of feels like an early 90s version of Westworld, which for those of you who have not seen it, Westworld was an HBO show that was really like cerebral and cool, but it was like in some sort of near future where really rich people usually would pay to go into like this living hologram, like a holodeck, and basically play to their heart's content. And the most popular program was this like old Western town. So you can work out your fantasies of like being the good guy and saving the day, or being the bad guy, or being like going to see the prostitutes in the saloons or the whatever, right? And then it just like resets. And then you can come back in as many. It's kind of like Disneyland, right? Mm-hmm. Like it all resets at night and you come in the next day and it's all fresh, except some stuff starts going wrong. And it's all like robots that are playing the characters, mm-hmm. right? And they start becoming like aware of what's happening to them. And they're like, wait, I've done this before. I've had this memory before.
That's when it all goes wrong. I have never seen Westworld, but it's on my list of things to watch. And it sounds really dark and disturbing, but also like something I would super enjoy. So
you know what?
I don't know.
I feel like I need to go back. I watched all of season 1, and at one point, like the woman who like owns the saloon or like runs the saloon or the pleasure house or whatever, she draws this picture of this man that she sees in her dream, and it's like one of the technicians who works on the robots. And she's like afraid that it's going to be discovered. So she pulls up a loose floorboard to hide it and realizes that she's already drawn like 50 of this.
Oh my goodness.
And you're like, oh no, right? Right. So stuff like that. So it feels a little bit Westworldy, where it's like you're going in and you're just getting to play like your Western fantasy mm-hmm. heart out. You know what I mean? Like I'm
minus
a sheriff.
The factor. We're saving that. We're saving that for a few more episodes from now, A Ship in a Bottle, where we find that Moriarty is still alive. And has been alive and awake and aware for all of these years.
That's
inside
such a nightmare,
which sucks. But this episode's not like that. It's actually super happy, fun, light. And you know what it reminded me of when you were talking? I feel like this is the do-over episode for that really stupid episode. I think it was Cost of Living, when Loaxana took Alexander to the holodeck, and it was just the worst nonsense garbage. This is like the do-over of that holodeck trip. And this is great.
One of the notes that I wrote was, I am so glad Loaxana is not here, because she would just be messing everything up. She would be helping nothing. Anyway, okay, let's just jump in. So that was kind of the background of these Westerns, and like why it was called Fistful of Datas, because it was a nod to Sergio Leone's Spaghetti Westerns, which was like a title that he apparently held like some pride in, where he's like, I make the spaghetti Western. And it became a whole genre, and it became such a big deal that like these major Hollywood movie stars and producers and everything would like fly to Italy in the 60s and like film those movies there.
Good for him.
Because the topography was pretty similar to what you can get like mm-hmm. in Central California, and it looks real like Old West towny, and it was like at a fraction of the cost. So it actually launched like a ton of people's careers. Anyway, so let's just jump right in. The Enterprise has entered orbit around some planet, but their scheduled rendezvous with the supply ship Biko has been delayed 48 hours. So in the meantime, many of the crew members are taking advantage of the delay to pursue their own projects, which I was like, yay, slice of life. Mm-hmm. We love seeing this.
We get this 48-hour layover situation, and mm-hmm. it opens with us seeing Picard's particular hobby, which is him learning to play the flute. And this is such a beautiful throwback to Inner Light, where he first develops a love for the flute. In his
Resican flute. Yes.
Yeah, in his alternate life that he experiences, it's just a really beautiful callback. And I don't know if you noticed, but his outfit was like his same uniform, but black and gray. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, is this his new casual clothes? Because the last time we saw him in casual clothes, I think he was on Risa with that really shiny low V-neck situation. And I'm liking this one a lot better.
Yeah, you know what? Yes. I think that it's what that is it's not a different uniform. It's the uniform he wears under the red jacket. Because if you look at it,
if he
like
was Superman and he pulled it off, it'd be the same outfit.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because when he wears that really cool uniform with the red suede jacket with the black kind of like rubber shoulders, he's wearing that underneath and his comm badge is just on the outside of the jacket. But when you take it off, you know, climate controlled, I guess you don't need a jacket. I don't know. Like he's hanging in that thing. I imagine that jacket must weigh a ton. I really want that jacket, but where on earth would I ever wear it? Like where? Anyway.
Where wouldn't you wear it is my question.
Girl,
it's appropriate in every scenario.
I live by the beach. I can't imagine. Anyway, so Picard's playing his Resican flute, which is really nice because it's not just like this bottle episode where like he had this inner light experience, they gave him the flute, and that was that, and you never see it again. Like it's really nice that he's still kind of like honoring the Resican life that he led and like is learning the flute. I think it's really sweet. But the poor man cannot get more than like 2 bars in because he starts playing and Geordi comes in and he wants to work on some routine part of the ship's commands and reroute them into Data's neural net, allowing Data to directly control part of the ship in an emergency, which is actually a really great idea. And Picard's like, granted, get the hell out of here. And he's like, okay, computer, reset the music. First part, damn it, to somebody else like rings the doorbell. And it's Beverly to be like, I want you to play the part of the butler in this new play. Which I actually think, did you notice? He's like, I don't have time to learn a bunch of lines. I can't commit to a whole role. And she's like, oh no, you wouldn't be a main character. And he's like, oh, really?
I thought you were going to say like the part where he said, by the way, I'm not a very good actor. And I was like, nice. That they actually made him say that line is just so
nicely
hilarious.
Nicely done.
Yeah. And then she's just like, it's only 2 lines. You'll be great, Jean-Luc, and all this. And he's like, I'll think about it. And I was just like, he cannot get out of this to save his life. This is the time for you to be like, hey, Bev, thanks, but no thanks. I don't want to be in the play. I'm sure it's going to be amazing. I just don't want to be. I just want to be in the audience. It's not personally going to
do it for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, but the way this is going, he will be in that play.
He absolutely will be in the play. And then he's like, okay, cool. Now that that's done for now, computer, reset music. God damn it. Like somebody else comes to the door. And Worf wants to use the downtime to beef up security training, which I think is about damn time. Okay.
Right? Do we need to wait for emergencies? No, we don't. Let's use this downtime wisely.
Your security, I hate to break it to you, Worf, but has been god awful since day one. But Picard does say, wait, we are picking up more crewmen, like more security in like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So can that be postponed 2 weeks? Because then it's going to be like redundant. And he's like, fine. I can use the time to do a maintenance check on the forward phaser array. And Picard's like, is there some reason that you're just like adding extra work? This is downtime. Go have some down time and leave me alone with my flute.
Computer lock quarters. This is why we need locks, friends.
Right? Or just like move a bureau in front of the door. So even if the door opens, it can't come in.
Sorry. Do not disturb hologram on the outside, or
like an angry looking Picard.
Head over to one of the holodecks, which apparently there's more than one. And just peace out.
Go down to holodeck 11. No one would think to look
or hit up cargo bay 27. No one's ever in there.
Go there. Or go to a fucking Jeffrey's Tube Junction. Like seriously, anything but your quarters, whatever. The point is, he finally gets to play his flute, and then we see Alexander in his quarters with what looks like the bulkiest iPad in the galaxy. And Alexander's like, what did he say? What did he say? He's like, the captain has seen fit to relieve me of some of my extra duties, so I guess I can do it. And he's like, what? And he grabs a cowboy hat and throws it on his dad's head and goes, saddle up, father. And I was like, oh, it's so cute.
It's super cute and super sad that Worf is just trying to get out of spending quality time with his son. It's like, Worf, buddy, like at some point, we've all established this kid's not going anywhere. And we know you like him. Deep down, you like him.
Yeah.
I think you should get to know him because I think it's going to make for a better experience as he ages. Like, this is the time and the only time in this kid's life where he's going to want to spend any time with you at all. So let's like go ahead and capitalize on this.
Yes.
Yeah, because this is all you get. And
because,
time
buddy,
is running out.
In like 2 years, he's going to be moody AF with the hormones. And like, it's going to be too late. So just,
And 6 years from now, he'll probably be back on Klingon with Kern. Like slicing and dicing his enemies or something. But he's not going to want to be up under you being like, father, like that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So I was like, come on, Worf. Like, I know being with little kids
Worf.
can be painful sometimes, but like, especially if they're your kid, man, suck it up. So I'm glad that Picard blocked his attempts to ignore Alexander, because this ended up being such a great program. And like 10 seconds into the program, Worf is like, all right, okay. Mm-hmm. Like, see, Alexander picked a good program for you. He's not going to have you in here playing like, I don't even know, but something that would be so not up Worf's alley. He picked something that like was really going to have Worf having a good time and have Alexander having a good time, which is a lot of foresight for a kid, I have to say.
Yes. So they go into this old West town on the holodeck, and I love that Alexander calls it the Ancient West, and Deanna Troi also calls it the Ancient West a little bit later. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I think it's such a nice touch, because we hear of Old West, and it's just a saying at this point, like the Old West. But in 400 years or 300 years, it will be the Ancient West. Like, I love that. I love just like the world building of like, this is how far we've come. Mm-hmm. Now, that Old West town was filmed in a backlot at Universal Studios in Hollywood. And girl, it was 113 degrees at the time of filming that day.
You know what? This is so interesting, because when I saw that scene, I thought to myself, this looks exactly like the backlot of Universal Studios.
Well, and I was like, good news, it is.
And I was really thinking, I was like, was it filmed on this lot, or was it filmed at Paramount, or was it filmed at, because we're in LA, there's a bunch of studios around here. So I didn't know where
there's like tons.
But I was looking, but that area of Universal Studios backlot is called it's called 4 Points, Texas. And cool. It's got a couple of streets, but all of them look like that. They're all saloony, taverny, wooden.
So
and
fun.
They've got all different kinds, like different size and shapes of doors and things like that. So when they have a really short actor, they put them in front of a really short door to make them look really big and tall. When they have a tall actor, they put them in front of a short door. Like, they have all these little tricks to make the cowboy, whoever is the main protagonist, look amazing. They've got a way, like, if it's like a short man and a really tall like female lead, they'll have the man stand on like a wooden block, and the lead, the female lead, be like standing on a stair lower, but then they'll angle the camera so that it looks like he's taller. Like, they have all these tricks that they tell you about. And that road they were walking on, the one that they did the gun battle on, is actually a paved road that you drive through on the tour. But when they were filming, whenever they film in that spot, they bring in truckloads of dirt to make the dirt. They just lay the dirt down,
like sand and
so they actually purchase it, they rent it, they bring it all out, they lay it all down, they film however many scenes they need, and they scoop it all back up and take it back wherever it came from, which is
that's
so
tons and tons. That's like my brother at the time of this recording has a 2.5-year-old kiddo, and he made him like this really, my mom, as like a early Christmas present, was like, hey, I'm going to buy you like one of those big swing set Jungle Jimmy things, the kind that has like 2 or 3 swings and a little slide and like a little thing you climb up, right? Like, this was a big gift, right? But my brother was like, hey, I need to like do some stuff to my backyard to make it like work for this, right? So he had to like dig out all the like grass and dry it out, and then put like mulch down, and then you have to put like decomposed granite and all this shit. And like, I mean, it's like a 10 by 10 square. It took 1.5 ton of decomposed granite for that 10 foot by 10 foot square. And I was like, what did you say? And he's like, yeah, it was over a ton of decomposed granite that you have to buy. And decomposed granite is like granite that's like broken down into like sand, but it's really compact. Like, you compact it down, it doesn't really go anywhere. And I was like, holy crap. So thinking about how that entire, like, let's say 80 feet of road has to be, oh my God,
and
how many trucks is that? Too,
to make sure that it all looks good. No, it all looks
the same. Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, let me tell you. So it was 113 degrees at the time of filming these scenes. And Data, as an android, can never be seen sweating, right? So like, they had all these Data doubles that were like filming, and then would just go run and stand in front of whatever air conditioner was working to try to like dry off their skin so it doesn't look glistening or sweaty. But the one that suffered the most was Worf, because he had that wig and skull cap on, forehead prosthetic, and a big ass wig that was like really thick and had like a rubber base to it,
and like a cowboy hat.
And a cowboy, I mean,
keeping all the heat in.
Was like like Michael Dorn, who plays Worf, was just an absolute hell filming that, and I believe it sounds horrific.
I couldn't see it. I didn't notice glistening on anyone.
Exactly, because they really stayed there, and they had these like portable air conditioning things that just blow in your face for 10 minutes, and then you go film a scene for 5 minutes and you come back and stand there. It was insane. Anyway, so Worf does not know what we're doing there. What are we doing here? And I love that Alexander's like, well, you're the sheriff and I'm your deputy. And I absolutely love that Worf goes, so we're in law enforcement. And I was like, God damn, Worf, you really don't stray from your path very far.
I love that though, because I was like, does Alexander know his dad or what? He picked something where Worf would be in law enforcement. So he'd be like, all right, like I get this. It's not like he made him literally anything else where he would have been like, all right, no, this isn't my thing. You put me as like a main potter or an artist or something, like that would make sense. But making him a sheriff totally makes sense.
It does make sense.
We also see like the spurs and the cowboy boots and the vest and everything was just glorious. Yes. Like the costumes in this episode are so ridiculously fun. And just,
they're so great. I mean, even like Deanna hasn't come in yet, but damn, she looks so incredible in that role. So good. Now, meanwhile, this is happening. Data and Geordi work on connecting the ship systems to Data's neural net. And so we kind of cut back and forth between like the ancient West and like main engineering. But we enter the rootin' tootin' shootin' saloon and we get a lay of the characters. There's like this bad guy. There's people shooting in the saloon. There's a really racist profile of like a Mexican dude that's like laughing and drinking tequila. And I was like, I really could have done without that fucking guy there. And like,
but I did see why they used him at the very, very end when he turns into a
because he turned into Data. And I was like,
okay, yeah, I see what you did there.
Yes. Now, Worf and Alexander enter the saloon, and he's about to take down the bad guy Eli in about 2 seconds. And Alexander's like, no. Okay, computer freeze program. It needs to be more challenging, otherwise it's not fun. Like, let's try it again from the top, everybody. Alexander's like, computer from the top. And like, everything resets and they walk back in and Eli this time does not go quietly. And like a bunch of them now have Worf cornered and Worf is held at gunpoint. And suddenly a mysterious stranger enters the saloon and shoots the hat right off of Eli's head. And it's Counselor Troy, and she's being such a badass. And she does like an old Westie like accent too. It is so fucking fun. Oh my God, this episode is so much fun.
Yeah, it's great because Eli has this line where he's cornered them all. And actually Worf got into a huge fight and beat one of the guys up and just he loved being jumped. He was all about that life. And it wasn't until Eli pulled a gun where Worf was like, all right, I'll stop fighting. But before that, he turned to Alexander and kind of smiled and winked and was like, I see the appeal of this program. He's like, all right, this is what I'm talking about. Some Klingon. He's like, nah, I get it. Yeah. So, but then he pulls a gun out and then Eli threatens not just to shoot him, but to also steal all of their jewelry. He's like, take all their jewels. And then Worf is like so appalled. He's like, you're a killer and a thief? Like, how dare you? And that's when Eli, slowly walks towards him and says, well, man's got to make a living. So then Troy comes in, shoots the hat off his head and says, I suggest you find another line of work. And everyone's like, ooh. And you're like, oh, this is so fun. Such a great line. So good. We're bouncing back to engineering and seeing what's going on with Data. And we get to see this really cool, like, internal view of Data's head, which I'm obsessed with every time.
Oh, I love it.
And they pop open the scalp and you see the LEDs flashing. It's so cool. Like, this is a cosplay that needs to exist in my life. I'm
sure it has been done a bunch, but man, it's so cool.
For sure. Like, I will either make or purchase it, but I'm going to look on YouTube and see how expensive and how much time it takes to make it. And if it's beyond my threshold of patience, I will be purchasing this item because I need to own it. So there's this great line that happened a little earlier in engineering as Geordi's plugging things into Data's head, where Geordi's just like, man, I never get used to seeing you like this, Data. And Data's like, why? You work on systems like this, like very complex
all the time.
And Geordi says, yeah, but you're not just another electronic system. And Data's like, thank you, Geordi. Like, he takes that as such a deep compliment, right?
I know.
Like, even though it's like the most obvious thing. And then he goes, nor are you just another biological organism. Like, same to you, pal.
Another way of being like, you're not just a person, you're my friend.
Yeah.
Which is really sweet.
It's so sweet. I love moments like this. So at this point, Data's accessing things and seeing what all his brain can do. And there's a little bit of a power surge. He freaks out and he disconnects everything. He's like, I'm disconnected from the computer. Okay, I'm disconnected. Yeah. So they're like, we don't know what went wrong, but like, let's run some tests. Let's figure it out. So Geordi goes off to run some tests, and before Data joins him, he picks up his tricorder, he flips it like a gun and slides it into its holder, just like Eli kept flipping his gun and sliding it into his holster. And they're like, my first question was, since when do tricorders have a holster? Since never. Since this moment right here.
Since they needed it for the shot, that's when it started.
Just like they don't have pockets, they don't have holsters for those tricorders.
You know what? I've seen holsters for tricorders when you're on an away mission, but not just hanging around the ship.
But are those for tricorders or are those for phasers? On an away mission?
they look like pockets for tricorders because they're kind of like bigger and square. Okay. Yeah, to like fit a tricorder. But I thought it was funny how he spun it around and slapped it in there, and I was like, this is. And there was a little guitar twang. It was like. I was like, okay, enter Western Town.
So in the next scene, we enter Western Town.
Yes, we're in the ancient West, and Eli is incarcerated, and Worf and Alexander try to figure out what to do next. And Eli threatens that when his paw hears about this, there'll be hell to pay. And Troy says, he's right. You're no match for the Hollanders. And I was like, God damn it. You're so awesome, Troy. Like, what a flip from where we started the podcast, where we're like, God, can she please be written off? She sucks. And she's just so kick-ass. It wasn't
her fault. It was the writers. It was can she be either written off or written better? Can we make a choice? So they chose written better. So thanks for that.
Thank God. Because Marina Sirtis is always great, but no, she's amazing. So she's like, you can't call me Troy. My name is Durango, and I'm a mysterious stranger. And she agrees to be a temporary deputy for Worf for a price of $500. So he sends Alexander to the bank to get some money because, I guess an 8-year-old kid can just go withdraw $500 from the bank. He can
when he's the deputy, and he volunteered. So I say let him do his thing. This is his program.
Also, it's the holodeck, so whatever. But when Alexander goes to the bank to get the money to pay her, Worf asks Troy, like, how does she know so much about this time period in Earth's history? And she explains that her dad used to read her stories of the ancient West when she was a little girl. And I was like, what a freaking adorable backstory that is for Troy. And like, no wonder she would be so excited to like join in the fun. And this is, I feel like, the first time we really see Alexander and Worf having fun.
Yeah, it's the first time we see them having fun and having just like a normal, healthy father-son relationship that is outside of their normal everyday life, right? This is like, I'm taking time to play with my son. Like, this is like sitting on your kid's
doing
living
an
room
outing,
playing Legos or something. This is a very specific carved out moment of just quality bonding time, which we haven't really seen before. And it's really beautiful.
It is. Now, Miss Annie, the barkeep, comes by to thank him and make a super obvious pass at him. And he's like, I'm sorry, I can't have dinner with you tonight. I've got a prisoner that I need to keep an eye on. And Troy is like, I'll take care of this. You go. Like, Troy's a little bit of like a shit stirrer. And he's like, no, I can't do that. But thank you. And Miss Annie like slaps him. And she's like, is it another woman? Is it one of the ladies at like Miss So-and-so's house of pleasure? Is it? Like slaps him and storms out. And I was like, oh my God. Okay.
And Eli just chuckles and goes, wow, you got a real way with women. And Durango's like, true. That's true.
That is. He does. Now, in his quarters, Picard asks the computer to play back the Mozart trio that he had been recording with the Russian flute earlier. But it starts to play that, and then it immediately jumps to Dvorak's Slavonic dances, and it was like, is this a malfunction? Is this like, what's going on? Because he was like, it's like, what is going on here? Right. So now around the ship, we're starting to notice that there are some glitches happening. And then in like the rehearsal for Beverly's play that I noticed Picard is not participating in, Riker starts giving his lines, but we learn really quickly that Riker's lines have been replaced on the data pad with Ode to Spot from like a couple episodes ago.
Yeah,
what is going on?
I always laugh out loud at that scene because that particular poem is just so ridiculous and it's so Data. And so to hear Riker say it with the same amount of passion that Data uses was just so hilarious. And then when Beverly picks it up and picks up the lines, and
she's like, reading, "What are you reading?" What
Yeah,
are you even reading, sir?
It's great. So, but it's great because it's hilarious. But the sad side is that Beverly's entire play seems to have disappeared. It's all been replaced with Data's poetry. And we know how fun Data's poetry is. So that's a bummer, especially if you spent all this time writing a play. So next thing you know, we're in engineering trying to figure out what the heck is going on. Like, why is everything kind of going wrong? And so we find out that the information is still there. The play exists somewhere, but the problem is in the data retrieval system. And we actually learn later on that it was a subsystem of the computer, the main computer, that got swapped out with one of Data's during that brief power surge. So just whenever things try to access things using that subsystem, it pulls from Data's records, like his memories and his poetry and his things that he likes or whatever. So it's just it's a little computer glitch that they can easily fix with a memory wipe on Data and a memory wipe on the computer. Unbeknownst to them, that glitch has had some other effects in the holodeck.
Some like real dangerous effects. Now, on his way back from the bank, Alexander is captured by some baddies, and it turns out that the leader of the bad guys is Eli's father. But when he comes out from behind the shadows, it's Data. And I was like, oh, this is not good at all. Which, by the way, Brent Spiner said this is one of the most fun episodes he filmed. Even playing Miss Annie at the end. It's just like, it was so much fun. He said that he was really hopeful. He kind of joked that like, maybe after this episode, somewhere down the line, there would be an episode called And a Few More Datas. Because he just wanted to do like more characters as Data. I think it was really funny. So it's, in his quarters, Data is starting to show signs of the holodeck program like bleeding into him. And when Spot keeps jumping up on his table when he's trying to work, he's like, Spot, you are interfering with my ability to productively work. And then he puts the cat down and the Spot jumps back up and it goes, vamoose, you little varmint, and like puts Spot down and like gets right back to work. And the entire time is completely unaware of like this overbleed that's happening between these recreational programs and his own like positronic net. So I thought that was kind of funny to see him like start westerning a little bit like, on the ship.
And I thought it was very like true to life because at the time of this recording, laptops were not a thing. Like that didn't exist. Though he was typing on a laptop, there was no such thing as a laptop at the time of that recording. At least not available to the general public. It was all all science fiction, make believe nonsense. All that
life imitating art, so beautifully.
But everyone I know who has a cat has experienced what Data experienced of having the cat jump on the laptop only when you're typing on it, because that cat knows you are giving something else your attention. It's very aware of it and doesn't care for it at all. So I was watching this and I was like, wow, this is like really cool future pacing here. Like, little did they know.
Cool. It is very cool. It really is life imitating art and then life imitating art again, where it's like the laptop is one, but also the cat interrupting you while you're trying to type on the laptop is another part. It's cool. Now, in ancient West, Worf comes into the saloon to ask about Alexander, and Miss Annie is pretty ticked off to see him, but goes to get him a drink. And Frank Hollander, who's Data, comes into the saloon and Worf is like, Commander, what are you doing here? Which is exactly what I would say. And Frank is saying he wants Eli released, but Worf won't give in. He's like, I'm sorry, he's committed a crime. He has to be tried in Carson City, Nevada, or wherever the hell, right? And I love that Frank goes, are you sure there isn't anything we can do a trade for? And he's like, you have nothing I want. And he's like, really? What about your deputy? He says it too. And he's like, wait, give me Alexander. But he's like, not until I get Eli. And as Worf goes to walk out, Frank pinches Worf's shoulder and hurts the shit out of him.
Vulcan neck pinch.
Kind of, right?
It was super painful. You can see it. And Worf's just like, Commander, like, what are you doing? Like, you're taking it too far. And when he looks at him, something about Data's eyes or something tells Worf immediately, this is not Data. This looks like Data,
like, Commander?
But this is not Data. And you're like, wow, how did he catch that in 10 seconds? Because it's not him. We know that. But how did he know that? But he figured it out. So he's like backing up slowly and he turns around and then Frank says, Sheriff, I wouldn't walk out that door if I was you. And then his henchmen all pull out their guns. And then you're like, what's
okay? So what other option do I have? Just stay here and get blown to
I think it was
smithereens?
stay here and finish the negotiations, I think is what it was. Because he was like, I want to do this exchange. And Worf was like,
I
no.
wondered about that.
He was like, no deals and no trades. And they were like, I think you should you should think about that again. Mm-hmm. And so, I didn't remember this scene, like how it ended. So Worf actually makes a break for it. He just dive bombs out of the saloon with a firestorm, a hail of bullets,
like a hail of gunfire. Yep.
And I was like, oh my gosh, like this, how did you not get shot like 3 times in the back of the head? This is crazy. But he somehow escaped and I guess tucked and rolled and started running, because when he gets back to the jail where Counselor Troy / Durango is, she's like, oh my gosh, he'd been shot. He was shot 1 time in a really cute place on his arm.
Yeah, like on his upper arm.
Yeah, so we don't have to see any like blood or gore because he didn't get shot anywhere else. But
she took off her really cute neckerchief and tied that up.
She did, but you're like, wow, but he could have gotten shot like 16 times during that one jump. My goodness.
Yep, that was really bad. And he makes it back just in time, as you said, and he explains what's going on. And then you hear Eli go, "Oh, did you get shot?" But it's Data's voice. And Durango and Worf turn around, and the look on their face of like, oh, fuck. When you see that it's Data in there, it's like everybody's turning into Data.
Because it's one thing if there's one Data, that's just some kind of weird glitch. But if there are 2 Datas, then you're like, okay, now there's a pattern. And we're probably in trouble because neither of these people are Data, we are sure. And they don't know about the test that Geordi was running with Data. They don't know anything about this.
They just know something is totally wrong. It's like 2 islands, this entire episode is like 2 islands that are not in communication with each other.
Yes, but they're sharing the same contaminated water source or something.
Yes. Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that as they're kind of trying to figure this out, they're trying to end the program, close the program, stop the program, whatever. They realize not only can you not stop this program in any way, shape, or form, but clearly the safeties are off because Worf has been shot. And Alexander is now in real danger. It's not fake make-believe danger that we all thought it was, that even Alexander thought it was. He had programmed this, by the way, so he knows how the story's supposed to go, even though the other 2 don't. And now they're like, okay, shoot, we really need to get Alexander back. Like, this isn't a game anymore.
Yes. And like, now at this point, this is kind of where aboard the Enterprise, I mean, it's all aboard the Enterprise, but when we see the Enterprise, this is where we're really noticing the malfunction. There was an interface experiment caused by one of the computer's subroutines, to be altered. So that particular subroutine affects recreational programming, among other things. So that would explain the song being erased and, the play being erased and like replaced with Ode to Spot and Picard's music. And they don't know about the danger in the holodeck yet, but that's when Data starts really getting Western-y. He's like, y'all must be mistaken. And he goes into Western mode really quickly. And I love that Riker's like, Geordi, maybe you should take him with you to main engineering to work this out. And he's like, got it. And Data follows Geordi out, doing the like John Wayne like swagger stagger, and then spits in one of the plants. It goes and like sucks his teeth and walks out. And I love that Riker and Picard both are looking at each other like, I don't know what that was, but the sooner this is cleared up, the better for everybody.
Yeah, that's my least favorite scene.
Really?
Not the fun accent and all that, the spitting part. Like that moment is my least favorite moment because it is completely nauseating for me. You know how easily I get nauseous, right? So like someone hawking a loogie, that's it. I'm done.
I could be like, gosh, I had an upset stomach last night. She's like, I don't want to hear any more about it because I'm going to throw up. I'm like, really? Okay.
That is true. That is true. So this scene, I always look away. I'm like, oh, because I forget it's coming and then it happens and I'm like, oh gosh, next. Wash out.
It's so perfect for the Western thing because it's like, saloons had like spittoons back in the day, right? So it's like, okay.
I'm so glad I was not back in the day.
No, like so glad.
If I wrote this program, I would go ahead and delete that part of the program.
Delete that part, yeah. Now, in the sheriff's office, Troy is noticing that Eli is shuffling his cards at android speed. So she's like, oh, crap. They don't just look like Data. They have his abilities. This is what we've been afraid of. You know what I mean? If it looks like Data but has regular person abilities, okay. But like now we're competing with androids.
Yikes.
Oh, yeah, we're competing with androids. Now Frank comes to see Eli, and this always makes me mad when Eli plays the sad son bit. And he's like, Paul, they haven't fed me, and the sheriff's been roughing me up some fierce.
Wasn't he such a big bad man when he was in the saloon? with his boys and his gun, jumping one single individual with like 5 dudes. And now all of a sudden he's like, you gotta save me, Pa. So which one is it?
Help me,
which
Pa.
one is
I'm real
it?
hungry.
Are you grown or are you a little kid?
Man, shut the fuck up. Okay, that's one thing. The other thing I did you notice that they had whatever they did, like the Western trick to make Frank look taller than Eli, to make it be like father and son kind of thing. And I was like, I love it because it's played by one actor who's the same size as himself. So it's like, okay. I thought that was really cool.
It was great too, because if you look at the facial expressions that Eli's making, he looks extremely pathetic. And that is the same facial expressions that the other actor who played Eli was making. So you're like, wow, that like they're both taking on the mannerisms of a person who doesn't exist, but they're both doing it the same way. It's just so cool.
It's super cool. And this also, I forget about this episode a lot, but like Star Trek TNG does such an amazing job of like meeting our twins. Like Times Squared, Picard meets the Picard from 4 hours, you know, in the future. And then Riker meets Thomas Riker. Yeah, Thomas Riker. And then you've got this too. And it's just like, we've got like duplicates and it's just super fun. And I really, really love it. I love it. Anyway, you know, I love that Frank goes, don't you worry, boy. We're going to get you all, this is going to be sorted out and have you home in time for supper. And I love that Frank goes, are you sure you don't want to do a trade? And now that like, Worf knows that Alexander is in real trouble. He's like, I have reconsidered. I need my deputy back. And he's like, I thought you'd say that. Right. So they decide to do this prisoner swap, Eli for Alexander. And Frank looks at Durango and goes, strangers ain't invited. And I just think it's so great. Because like she's just the mysterious stranger to everybody, which I think is amazing.
It's great. It's really fun. And Frank walks out. And Worf turns to Troy and, you know, it's like, all right, so we've got, you know, a couple hours to the trade-off. And he's starting to make plans. And Troy's like, in every Ancient West story I've ever read or heard of, the bad guys never keep their word. And Worf is like, what? Like, he's so appalled by this news. He goes, but we made a deal. We gave our word. And it's like, oh, honey. Like, he's not a Klingon. He's a bad guy. Yeah. And she says in 2 hours' time, he is going to do everything in his power to kill you. And he's got android speed and precision and agility and all that. Yeah. So let's go ahead and plan.
This isn't going to go well. This is not going to go well. Yeah. And now at this point, Data and Geordi are doing the memory purge on Data and on the holodeck, but it's going to take a couple of hours. And they still, because they can't be in contact or like for some reason because of the glitch, Troy and Worf cannot contact like the ship outside. Like nobody knows what's going on. So it's going to be a few hours. Now, remember, Worf and Troy do figure out like, okay, we can't stop this program or pause the program or freeze the program, but all of these stories are written specifically to play out a certain way. So if we just get to the end of the story, it should just like automatically end the story and like, you know, unlock the holodeck, right? So they're like, okay, we got to get to the end of the story. We got to do this prisoner swap. So Worf and Troy.
I just thought of right now?
What?
I thought about how much I love audiobooks and I love a really good story. And if I was trapped in an audiobook, you know, as a holodeck story, like you would want to be trapped in a 9-year-old's story because it's going to end in like 15 minutes. But the stories I like The Expanse, for example, every one of those audiobooks is like 27 hours long. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if I was trapped in The Expanse and I had to make it to the end without dying with space battles and breaches in the hull and no more food and diseases and aliens or whatever, like
100%.
I wouldn't make it to the end of the story.
100%.
So as we were talking, I was like, oh, thank God Alexander programmed this, because if I programmed it, we would never get out.
With, by the way, a little help from Barclay, and Barclay is the one who clearly put the prostitutes in. And I love that Worf was like, remind me to have a little talk with Lieutenant Barclay. It's like, yep, I would too. Anyway, Barclay continuing his winning streak. Anyway, so Worf and Troy use some like basic Old West materials and their comm badges to rig up this little temporary force field. And it's not going to last very long, but about 10 to 15 seconds is all they got. So that hopefully should be enough for Frank to unload and his cronies to unload like all their weapons. And then, you know, they can do some sort of have some sort of backup plan. And so they do the prisoner swap. Worf walks out with Eli. Frank walks out with Alexander. And as the prisoners are walking towards each other, the Hollander gang appear all looking like Data. Every last one of them now looks like Data. It's
and
literally
like
a fistful of Datas.
6 or 7 of these dudes. They're everywhere.
Yep. They're everywhere. And Worf goes, Alexander, get down! And like turns on his little comm badge force field. And Frank, like all his bullets just bounce off of him harmlessly, which I was like, thank God you came in with your comm badges. Like, whoo. And I was
also like, why didn't you draw your gun though? Like, I know you're not going to shoot right this second, but you're not even making it look like you're going to shoot. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, you're just standing there. Yeah, you're right.
I feel like he wasn't like selling it for my liking.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
You know what's interesting? As all these henchmen Datas are popping out of these doorways and, you know, behind every nook and cranny, a lot of those doors on that street don't open. And the ones that do open don't open to anything because they're just like edifices. And like 1 or 2 of them are actual, like they have an inside.
Like a saloon, yeah.
They have an inside, like they have enough of an inside for someone to be thrown through the window.
Yeah,
they've got enough space for someone to like just run, but it's still going to be filmed from the outside. So so you can see like when they creak open the door or whatever, you're just like I don't know. I'm just thinking like, oh, I hope there's no spider webs because there's nothing back there. There's no one cleaning stuff.
Yeah, they're just crunched in behind some plywood and stuff.
Yeah, the plywood doors, and I'm like, oh, that seems so. It was very cool to look at, but like having visited that exact strip, I was like, oh, like I don't know. I don't know if I could be an actor going to places that are full of cobwebs and giant spiders. For all I know,
that is hilarious. I didn't even think of that.
That's all I think about, girl. Spiders. I don't know why.
Now, Worf enables the force field. The bullets bounce off harmlessly, and as another toady goes to shoot, Troy, who was hiding in a wagon in the 113-degree heat with a tarp over her, swings up and gets the drop on him. And Worf shoots at Eli and like shoots the gun out of his hand or some shit. And he goes, don't show your face in this town again. And I love that Frank is like, fine. They just walk off. I was like,
he was going to shoot him because Frank ran out of bullets. Worf pulled a gun on him. And then the crony on the ceiling threw a gun down. It was like, catch it. And then he caught it. And then Worf somehow shot it out of his hand, which is such a classic Western move as far as 100%. I know of Westerns. And like such a fun shot. Like that's just a fun scene to see like a gun go flying because that's like a 1 in a million shot and it would never happen like that. But so cool to look at. So that happens and Frank is disarmed. And so he's like, go ahead, shoot me. And Worf is thinking about it. He cocks the gun because that's what you got to do with those kind of guns. Yep. And he looks over and he sees Alexander laying on his stomach in the saloon, just like staring at him. And so Worf is like, all right, don't show your face again. But he was like, I was just about to blow you away. But then my kid was watching, so I decided to let you live. But what's so interesting about that scene, like, you know, me seeing it through my eyes, I'm like, well done, Worf. You're not teaching your son the way of violence. But then the second thought is like, wait a minute, you guys are Klingons. If this was a Klingon program, you would have already eviscerated this man with a batleth. And Alexander would have been right next to you, chopping his head off. So I was like, well,
blood spraying everywhere.
Yeah,
like,
maybe this is the one case where you could have chosen violence and it wouldn't have been out of place.
Yeah.
But he doesn't. He chooses the peaceful way and all.
Yeah, and he says, don't show your face in this town again. Now, some trivia about that scene where he looks over at Alexander and Alexander is laying on his belly underneath the saloon door, like watching him. There was an original Western called Shane, which I've never seen, and I'm a big Western fan. So I'm like, oh, what's Shane? In that movie, there is a shootout in the town square because, you know, it's a Western. And like the protagonist's son is laying on his belly under the saloon door with his dog with him, like staring out, like to see what's going on. And so Patrick Stewart got this script and was like, woohoo, I get to like direct a Western. Oh my God, I don't know anything about Westerns at all. Like not at all. So what he did was like, he rented 2 classic Westerns every single night for like 3 weeks or whatever and just watched them all. And every like next morning he'd come in and like had all these like ideas and like ways that you could like, you know, pay homage to like these great Western movies and stuff. And that was actually one of those scenes. And I thought that was kind of cool. It's like, oh, that little scene, it was only a 2-second throwaway, but it was really cute and like, well done, like nice little nod to another famous Western. Now,
that's cool. That's really cool.
Right. So, you know, Eli, the whole Hollander gang saunters out of town, and Troy and Worf are reunited with Alexander in the saloon, but the program won't end. And they're like, well, what's left? And then you hear Sheriff, and it's Miss Annie as Data. She's also now Data.
Mm-hmm.
Bosoms a heaving, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also, like, Miss Annie had large breasts, so she did have bosoms a heaving. But like, Data just has a male chest.
It does, but they just made it really big. A really big box of a chest. There are no separated lumps, and it's all painted silver, which is awesome.
Yes. And as she's running toward him to thank Worf, he's like, computer and program and right, like he starts getting really nervous. And luckily Miss Annie, because it's a Western, she just places her chin like on his shoulder, and it's like, oh, and then the whole thing dissolves, and Worf looks around, he's like, oh thank God. He's just so terrified. That was the scariest part of the whole thing for him.
He was afraid of Miss Annie before she turned into Data. So as his commanding officer, it was just one straw too many. That's what I think it was.
Yes. So now everything has been restored, and the supply ship has appeared. Everybody's back to work now. And now there's like a little bit of a softer relationship between Worf and Alexander. And it seems like Alexander fell asleep on the couch, and Worf goes to like give him a kiss goodnight or tuck him in or whatever. But it turns out he's not actually asleep at all. He goes, Dad, you probably wouldn't go back to the holodeck. Like, after all the problems, like, you probably wouldn't want to go back, would you? And I just love Worf's answer. He goes, the town of Deadwood might face trouble again. If it does, it'll need a sheriff and a deputy. And he kind of walks off, and I was like, oh God, that is so cute and so well worth it. Mm-hmm. And then the last thing we see, Worf goes into the next room and picks up that hat again and kind of puts it on and does like finger guns like into the mirror, like he's drawing. Mm-hmm. And like, it's like, it's really off it goes. And it's just so like, everything about it is super cute. Super cute.
Scene where he's doing the finger guns in the mirror, which now they have a mirror. That's cool. While he's doing that, it made me think about last week's episode of Rascals and how Ensign Ro was never really a kid. So when she got turned into a kid, she got to kind of be playful, be silly, jump on the bed, use a crayon and color pictures of her mom, just like be a kid. That's what I felt like with this scene. It was a throwback to that for me, where I was like, Worf probably never got to be a kid because he grew up as an orphan. He was orphaned at 5 and taken from this like battle zone and dropped off on Earth for some strange reason, and then raised by humans. And his childhood was like not super fun. So I feel like through Alexander, he's getting to just like play, just use his imagination and play. And he's like, ooh, I'm a cowboy, and I thought that was a really great ending to the story.
I just loved it. I loved it. Well, what are your final thoughts on this, Shereese?
I mean, this is just another fun and frothy episode to keep the streak going, I guess. I feel like this was just a perfect palate cleanser before we get into some of the really hardcore topics that are coming up over the next several episodes. We're going to talk a lot about life and what does life mean and what does life look like and what does sentience mean and what does freedom look like. We're going to talk about, we're coming up to the episodes where Captain Picard gets kidnapped and tortured. We haven't had a kidnapping in a while, and we haven't had a torture in ever, I think, at least not of Picard. So it's going to get like really heavy. And I thought this was a nice, just like fun, light note.
Like a palate cleanser before the heavy duty stuff. 100%. I agree with you. Like, my final thoughts are the same as the initial, like cute, fun, funny, campy, sweet, I just really enjoy this episode every time I watch it. And it's always a delight when I hear things like the Ancient West.
It's so fun. It's interesting because it's called A Fistful of Datas, but the episode's all about Alexander and Worf.
Well, but then you do get like
a lot of datas.
five or six datas. So
the title's not incorrect. You do get a fistful of datas, but the story does not center around data. You just have to get a lot of datas. The story is about Worf and Alexander, and it's a great story.
It is a great story. It is. It's really, yes, this is the first time that I see them having like really positive interactions that are not like Troy being like, Worf, come on, dude. Come on, man. Like, be the parent, get it together. She's doing this like counseling sessions between them because they can't communicate. Like, she's just along for the fun. She's not along as a counselor. She's just along for the fun. And I'm here for it. Next week, we are talking season 6, episode 9, The Quality of Life. Thank you guys so much for nerding out with us through this super fun, funny episode. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Bye.
Thanks for geeking out with us. Be sure to join the crew at thetngpodcast.com to be the first to know when we do our live shows or host events exclusively for our members. We'll see you next time.